Okay, friends, we're going to pick up our study of the Law of One where we left off last time, which was in the middle of session 15. The last time we were together, we read through 15:12, I believe. Yeah. And I think what I'd like to do when we get into the reading is actually go back and read 12 again, because it's just so central to the teaching. It's just such a core part of Ra's teachings. So that's what we're up to today. We have just under an hour and a half, and I think we have about 13 questions to get through. So I think we got plenty of time. Before we get into the reading, I just want to take a moment and send love and light and gratitude to those of Ra, and also those other social memory complexes who are part of the Confederation of Planets in service to the one infinite creator, who have helped to bring this philosophy of unity, of oneness, to us so that we can come together and study in this way. So I offer my thanks and open my heart to all those beings who are our teachers, who help us figure out what's going on here and navigate it in a good way. And I also give thanks to the LL Research Group, who stewarded this material and continue to steward it in such a good and high integrity way. So yeah, just want to open this up with a little bit of gratitude and thanks. Okay. All right. So let's jump in at 15:12. Anybody feel like reading?
I'll read.
Great.
15:12. Questioner. How does an individual go about balancing himself? What is the first step? I am Ra. The steps are only one. That is, an understanding of the energy centers which make up the mind-body-spirit complex. This understanding may be briefly summarized as follows. The first balancing is of the Malkuth, or Earth, vibratory energy complex called the red ray complex, and understanding and acceptance of this energy is fundamental. The next energy complex, which may be blocked, is the emotional or personal complex, also known as the orange ray complex. This blockage will often demonstrate itself as personal eccentricities or distortions with regard to self-conscious understanding or acceptance of self. The third blockage resembles most closely that which you have called ego. It is the yellow ray or solar plexus center. Blockages in this center will often manifest as distortions towards power manipulation and other social behaviors concerning those close and those associated with the mind-body-spirit complex. Those with blockages in these first three energy centers, or nexi, will have continuing difficulties in ability to further their seeking of the law of one. The center of heart, or green ray, is the center from which third density beings may springboard, shall we say, towards infinite intelligence. Blockages in this area may manifest as difficulties in expressing what you may call universal love or compassion. The blue ray center of energy streaming is the center which for the first time is outgoing as well as inpouring. Those blocked in this area may have difficulty in grasping the spirit-mind complexes of its own entity, and further difficulty in expressing such understandings of self. Entities blocked in this area may have difficulties in accepting communication from other mind-body-spirit complexes. The next center is the pineal, or indigo ray center. Those blocked in this center may experience a lessening of the influx of intelligent energy due to manifestations which appear as unworthiness. This is that of which you spoke. As you can see, this is but one of many distortions due to the several points of energy influx into the mind-body-spirit complex. The indigo ray balancing is quite central to the type of work which revolves about the spirit complex, which has its influx then into the transformation or transmutation of third density to fourth density, it being the energy center receiving the least distorted outpourings of light love from intelligent energy, and having also the potential for the key to the gateway of intelligent infinity. The remaining center of energy influx is simply the total expression of the entity's vibratory complex of mind, body, and spirit. It is as it will be. Balanced or imbalanced has no meaning at this energy level, for it gives and takes in its own balance. Whatever the distortion may be, it cannot be manipulated as can the others, and therefore has no particular importance in viewing the balancing of an entity.
Great.
What do you think? Pause.
Yeah, let's pause there. I just wanted to go over it again because it's such a wonderful brief synopsis of addressing both the nature of our energy centers, our chakra system, as well as how they relate to the healing process. Just of course, in a way, the entire octave is a healing process. Like once the creator sparks off and creates individuated entities, the whole path back to oneness is another way of saying a healing process. Ra says that the law of one is healing, and healing is the law of one. They're sort of, it's the same way of saying the same thing. So understanding these energy centers and how they relate to our healing journeys just feels so wonderful and helpful and orienting. So I just wanted to read it again. And yeah, we can discuss it or we can continue on. Whatever you guys feel.
I think it's interesting that it was like past the Blu-ray or past the pineal indigo. There after that it doesn't matter. Like what, because that's more, it's like anything above this is source material. It's connected to and doing what it's going to do. Like it requires less human interaction and healing. These are our areas to work. This is just connected with everything else already. And so I always thought that was an interesting note that they made there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The way that I understand it is that it is a hologram or an expression of, it's almost like an energetic flower of the rest of the plant. Like if everything that comes up until the seventh ray are places that we can do healing work at. The reason why we can't interact directly with the seventh is because it is just an expression of everything that comes before it. It's just a sort of a signature, and everyone's seventh ray is basically this beautiful light structure that just is expressing the quality of their first 6 rays. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, and when I'm doing Reiki work, especially, sometimes it's easier to do the distance Reiki than it is with the hands-on. It's just very different. It's almost like the chemical bodies get in the way. But when I'm doing distance Reiki and I'm like really there with someone's spirit body, almost never is there an issue with the crown chakra, and with it's like a light beam just connected. It's like it reminds me of an umbilical cord in a way. It's just part of the root that is, and it's really hard to mess that one up. So being able to see the visual of that in sessions it's beautiful. And it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to comment about the red ray, and just comment that Ra said an understanding and acceptance of this energy is fundamental, but didn't say anything else about it.
Yeah. Yeah, we touched on it last week or 2 weeks ago, last session. I think Sean was on, and we had a brief discussion about it, because I have formed the opinion that you also can't work directly on the red ray either. Like, it's sort of fixed. But I think it's a little bit of a paradox, because I do think there's something to that. I do remember reading Ra talking about the red ray is, for an incarnation, it's kind of like it is what it is. Like it establishes like your primary route to the earth, and all of the energy that enlivens the body, that enlivens your sexuality, that enlivens your physicality comes through the red ray. But everybody kind of has a fixed route in a way. And we can pre-incarnatively, we can modulate that before we're born to really have an impact on what kind of life we'll have and what kind of focus we'll have. So you can't, once you're born and once you're in a body, I don't think you can really do a lot to change that like pipeline, that ray. But once we're here, we can still not accept it. We can like, there's ways, and I can relate to this. There's ways that, like, if I don't want to be here, like in a fundamental way, if I don't want to like accept my life or something like that, if I'm in a deep, deep depression, which is definitely, something I've moved through, there's a way that I can like not fully accept the red ray. So they say an understanding and acceptance of this energy is fundamental. So in a way we can work on it, but it's not to change it. I don't think we can really change the expression of the red ray. I think it's fairly fixed. But without accepting our life, without accepting our connection to earth and our body, then nothing else we can't really do a whole lot of work past that if we haven't, if we're not accepting the red ray energy, there's very little that we're going to be able to do beyond that. I'm going to check this chat. Yuri says, Scott says we can't work with one chakra and seventh. Yeah. And the raw words, that first chakra can't be blocked. Could be idea. We can work with it. Yep.
I thought for a minute, like I interpreted Ra's words that the first chakra can't be blocked because they didn't say when they were talking about the first that it could be blocked. But then they did say, like when they're talking about yellow ray, that's the third blockage. And then they say those with blockages in these first three energy centers. So it does seem like from their words, I interpret it that the first chakra can be blocked. Anyway, just in response to what you said, Yuri. But yeah, I know that I've heard that from Rob before too, that we can't work directly with the first ray. And I wonder about the difference. Like it can be blocked. It seems like seventh ray can't be blocked in the same way, or maybe it can be blocked because if others are blocked and it's an out picturing, or it's like the readout of the others, maybe it can be blocked but not like on its own. But anyway, it seems as though, just interpreting Ra's words, the red ray can be blocked, but I also think I've learned that it can't be worked with directly somehow.
Yeah. Nia?
Trauma happens, and someone's moments of choice around survivability to be living incarnate in this body, that root can definitely be, what I've seen is it's there. So I think again with the interpretations is like how does that land for us, and like how do we see and interpret the word usage? From what I've seen and my practice, it can definitely be clamped. It can be maybe it's the terminology blocked. To some, the word blocked may imply complete, total cutoffness. However, blockage could be just like toxified. Like if you literally picture a root, like a plant, into the earth, into the energy of Gaia, and we're walking with this root, and we can have it toxified. I have seen it be really ugly, and it's usually from trauma in someone's life and their spirit's decision whether or not they feel comfortable even being here incarnated right now. And those kinds of questions can darken it, can toxify it, but it's never been completely cut, because that is, in a sense, the life source. Our earth Gaia energy from the lower three versus the upper three. So I think it's around the terminology of the word blockage. It can definitely be clamped and toxified, though, but not cut, or you wouldn't be here, kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting, and if you ever, anybody who ever listens to Scott, he has a pretty sophisticated analysis of the energy bodies, and he talks about the correspondences. So if you imagine our energy bodies being centered by the heart, and the heart sort of this singular center of this column of our chakras, there's a correspondence between the upper three and the lower three. So 1 and 7 have they have a correspondence to each other, and 2 and 6, and then 3 and 5. And that's a pretty interesting and a little bit more advanced, teaching about the energy system. But yeah, the 1 and the 7, they certainly affect us, or we have experience through them. But there's something about the two of them that are somewhat unique, and I think that's the main point. And I think everything that everyone's saying, it all somehow works out. There's something about 1 and red ray where it's both. You can both work with it, but you can also not work with it. It's a little bit paradoxical, but there's some truth to both of those. And I think part of the clues to that is because of what Ross says about 7 and the correspondence between 1 and 7. So the other thing I wanted to mention, or I wanted to zoom in on, is well, there's actually a lot I could say, but it was interesting to me to read about the indigo ray. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to find it. Oh, no, sorry, the blue ray. Ross says, those blocked in this area, blue ray, may have difficulty in grasping the spirit-mind complexes of its own entity. So it's really not about the body at that point. At the blue ray point, spirit/mind complexes, I take to sort of mean basically the upper triad of chakras, which are more spiritual in nature. They don't really correspond to our physicality anymore. Like the lower 3 have a lot to do with our physicality. But the upper 3 have more to do with our spirituality, our connection with source, our connection with the rest of ourself, which is everything, the subconscious mind, these sorts of things. And so, yeah, the blue ray center, has a lot to do with wisdom, but it's sort of universal wisdom or spiritual wisdom. And those blocked in the blue ray may have difficulty in grasping the spirit/mind complexes. Yeah, I just thought that was interesting for him to mention that.
Yeah. To me, that is interesting in terms of relating with the when they talk about sexual energy transfer, like it's mostly green and blue ray energy transfer, or like that's what I have thought most about, I guess. And it's interesting that like blue has to do with expressing understanding of the self, and yeah, gosh, what am I trying to say about that? Well, I'm not finding words.
Okay. Amanda, did you want to seem like you leaned in to say something maybe?
Well, yeah, even though we read this last time, it did strike me differently to hear it saying difficulty in grasping the spirit mind complexes of its own entity. I didn't catch the of its own entity before. And I think I just thought to myself of a couple of people that I know that I've tried to emotionally connect with, and and exchange just a different way of relating with, and have felt like I couldn't quite penetrate some people, and it kind of makes me laugh a little bit, as though like, oh, it's okay, like if 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 the ray is closed or blocked, and there's like, you just can't really connect with somebody emotionally, or if they are unable to connect with me or express how they're feeling to me, it's not really their fault. It's just like, oh, it's just a blockage.
Mhm.
And so I like that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing that it's neat about this whole context, this whole teaching of balancing our energy centers, is that for me, it helps me realize that, at any given moment, there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of, like, there could be different aspects of the experience, even that I'm having right now, that are being processed at different levels of my beingness. So we really are multi-dimensional is kind of how it tends to be said. But we're complexes. We're complex beings, and we're processing energy at all these different levels simultaneously, all the time. And to me, it feels like it helps mature me when I really lean into that, and I really know that. It helps me stop grasping for simple truths and reductive, answers to my life or to things, and realize, like, wow, it's complex sometimes, and we are complex. And there may be multiple truths available to us in any moment, because there's going to be a truth of what we're experiencing and needing on maybe a more bodily level that may be independent from what we're experiencing and needing on a spiritual level. And those can both be there, and they're both relevant, and we can also understand the world that way. And I feel like it helps me kind of grow. I feel like it helps me grow up when I realize that, oh, I'm multidimensional. We're all multidimensional. Our reality is multidimensional. And so I really try to keep that in mind sometimes when I navigate my world and my life, to help me remain open, and not get closed around like what my mind tells me is going on. I don't just take it for face value, the sort of simple answer, what my mind says or wants. Yeah. So just inviting all of us into a realization that we are multidimensional, and it feels really rich. Cool. Anything else on this? Okay. Let's keep moving through. 15.13. I'll read a couple. Questioner: you previously gave us some information about what we should do in balancing. Is there any information that we can publish now about any particular exercises or methods of balancing these centers? I am Ra. The exercises given for publication, seen in comparison with the material now given, are, in total, a good beginning. It is important to allow each seeker to enlighten itself, rather than for any messenger to attempt in language to teach-learn for the entity, thus being teach-learner and learn-teacher. This is not in balance with your third density. We learn from you. We teach to you. Thus we teach-learn. If we learned for you, this would cause imbalance in the direction of the distortion of free will. There are other items of information allowable. However, you have not yet reached these items in your lines of questioning, and it is our belief-feeling complex that the questioner shall shape this material in such a way that your mind-body-spirit complexes shall have entry to it. Thus, we answer your queries as they arise in your mind complex. Yeah. So I think basically, just to summarize that, they're saying like, go ahead and practice what we've given you already. And what they're referring to is the previous Q&A 15.12 that we just read, and also some pieces they gave earlier. And the footnote here is previously given in session 5, Q&A 2. So in session 5.2, Rog responded to Don's question of saying, okay, we want to go ahead and be taught. We want you to teach us how to be a healer. And then Ra gave the 3 teachings of the mind and the body and the spirit, and to balance the mind and the body and the spirit. So that's what they're referring to there in 15.13. You know, they're just basically like, go ahead and work with what we've given you already, and then just ask us specific questions. Okay. 15.14. Questioner, you stated the harvest is now. There is not at this time any reason to include efforts upon these distortions toward longevity, but rather to encourage distortions towards the heart of self. For this, which resides clearly in the violet ray energy field, will determine the harvest of each mind-body-spirit complex. End quote. Could you tell us how to seek, or the best way to seek, the heart of self? I am Ra. We have given you this information in several wordings. However, we can only say the material for your understanding is the self, the mind-body-spirit complex. You have been given information upon healing, as you call this distortion. This information may be seen in a more general context as ways to understand the self. The understanding, experiencing, accepting, and merging of self and with other self, and finally with the Creator, is the path to the heart of self. In each infinitesimal part of yourself resides the one in all of its power. Therefore, we can only encourage these lines of contemplation, always stating the prerequisite of meditation, contemplation, or prayer as a means of subjectively, objectively using or combining various understandings to enhance the seeking process. Without such a method of reversing the analytical process, one could not integrate into unity the many understandings gained in such seeking. So I'll pause there. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
I'll say that I appreciate the phrasing, reversing the analytical process.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like inquiry to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like reversing the analytical process in terms of inquiry, at least, is what I see as reversing blockage. And blockage is resistance. And resistance comes through, at least the way that I understand it, comes through believing in limitation. And so it's like blockage is anywhere that we resist, at least the way I understand it, anywhere that we resist grace, which is resisting truth, resisting the goodness of reality. And in order to reverse that analytical process, there has to be a questioning of it and an understanding of it, like insight has to come. And I think the insight comes naturally, you know, like when we study the archetypes, like insight comes naturally through living, through like we naturally come to see things differently because that, like, I think that the archetypes lay out the process of evolution, like how we learn. And I think, you know, we can cooperate with and lean into that process of evolution and invite insight through reversing the analytical process.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, BJ. It also reminds me of something, a core teaching of Walter Russell's, which is the pairing of decentration with concentration. Like they're two modes of our relating to reality. Well, they're really sort of two modes of using the mind complex. And concentration is sort of taking infinity and like bringing into focus something that is finite, bringing into focus like an idea or an object that we're interested in either creating or perceiving. And decentration is reversing that process and gesturing back towards infinity, letting go of anything we're fixed on, and then letting go to the extent that we can just like rest back into like the spaciousness of reality. And yeah, it feels connected to me too. The reversal of the analytical process, like to be in the analytical process is to sort of concentrate, and to reverse that is to decentrate. I kind of appreciated that. I have appreciated that that word decentration and how it helps balance, because I'm often trying to concentrate, and so it's like, oh wait, there's another side of reality that's like letting go of that. Good reminder. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Nia, do you want to read?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. 1515.
Yep.
I don't mean to ask the same question twice, but there are some areas I consider so important that greater understanding may be obtained by possible restatement in other words. I thank you very much for your patience. Yesterday, you also mentioned that when there was no harvest at the end of the last 25,000 year period, quote, there were harvestable entities who shall choose the manner of their entrance into fourth density, end quote. Can you tell me what you mean by how, quote, they will choose the manner of their entrance into fourth density, end quote? I am Ra. These shepherds, or as some have called them, the quote, elder race, shall choose the time space of their leaving. They are unlikely to leave until their other selves are harvestable also. Questioner, what do you mean by their other selves being harvestable? I am Ra. The other selves with whom these beings are concerned are those which did not attain harvest during the second major cycle. Questioner, could you tell me just a small amount of the history of what you call the elder race? I am Ra. The question is unclear. Please restate. Questioner, I ask this question because I have heard about the elder race before in a book called Road in the Sky by George Hunt Williamson, and I was wondering if this elder race was the same that he talked about. I am Ra. The question now resolves itself, for we have spoken previously of the manner of decision-making which caused these entities to remain here upon the closing of the second major cycle of your current master cycle. There are some distortions in the descriptions of the one known as Michael. However, these distortions have primarily to do with the fact that these entities are not a social memory complex, but rather a group of mind, body, spirit complexes dedicated to service. These entities work together, but are not completely unified. Thus, they do not completely see each the other's thoughts, feelings, and motives. However, their desire to serve is the fourth dimensional type of desire, thus melding them into what you may call a brotherhood. Questioner, why do you call them the elder race? I am Ra. We call them thusly to acquaint you, the questioner, with their identity as is understood by your mind complex distortion. Let me keep going.
Sure.
Questioner, Are there any wanderers in these elder race or not? Or with these elder race or not? I am Ra. These are planetary entities harvested. Wanderers only in the sense that they chose in fourth density love to immediately reincarnate in third density rather than proceeding towards fourth density. This causes them to be wanderers of a type. Wanderers who have never left the earth plane because of their free will rather than because of their vibrational level.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so the elder race, and then this is the group from South America that was, I think, the only group of harvestable entities at the end of the second major cycle. So 25,000 years ago, when Earth's second harvest portal opened, there was only one group of harvestable entities, and that was this group. And I think there's about 500 of them. And then, it sounds like Ra is referring to them as the elder race only because that's how Don knows of them through reading this book from Williamson. And then, yeah, there's some discussion of the term wanderer and are they wanderers, and it's a little bit maybe not nebulous, but a little bit confusing because they are basically fourth density entities coming back to third to help third density, but they never left. And wanderers, I think, more typically wander away from their home vibration. They wander away from where they graduated from, where their social memory complex is sort of native to, toward the call, towards those entities they're attempting to serve. And in this case, they never left. So it's a little bit, so they're sort of wanderers of a type, but not maybe in the more conventional sense. Makes me think of Bodhisattva. I know Bodhisattva has come up in referring to like higher density entities, but this makes me feel like Bodhisattva.
I was just going to say that. Actually, read my mind. The Bodhisattva vow. And I also wondered if the Bodhisattva vow counts off planet, because I remember reading the Bodhisattva vow, sitting, I was in my early 20s doing my Buddhist thing, and I got chills. I mean, like goosebumps, all head to toe, all over my body when I read the vow. And I was like, I think I've taken this in a non-egotistical way, but I was like, there's something about this. And I remember at the time I was like, well, I'm screwed because this is a long, hard task if we're dealing with Earth, right? And only recently I was discussing with someone, wonder if the Bodhisattva vow counts off planet, and it's more of a commitment to souls, regardless where they are. Because at the time I didn't have other planetary systems in mind when I read that. So I was like, oh man, I really signed up for a hard task here. And then recently I got excited to the idea that wanderers could easily have been part of that Bodhisattva vow to continue to reincarnate until, and I'm like, ooh, now the possibilities of reincarnation are like, it's infinite at this point. I'm like, oh wow, that was just mind blowing for that.
Yep. BJ?
I was just curious about your take, Moo, on you said you think of the elder race as those from South America, or those who went to South America from
native Earth souls, third density souls who were, part of some tribal, culture in South America who evolved on the positive path and were harvestable at the end of, the second master cycle. So these are Earth native. It's an Earth native group.
Yeah. Earth native group. So, I was just looking back at 14, 16, and 17, which is the footnote. It refers back to 14, 16, and 14, 17. And that doesn't refer to people from South America. So I just am curious if you know where you got that, and whether you think would it be those, like, so like Ra went and was interacting with people from Egypt, and other beings of the Confederation went and interacted with people from South America. Do you think the elder race is those who were influenced by the Confederation who came and visited?
Well, probably not, because the Confederation didn't come until the third master cycle.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
So these are entities who were living a simple life, and then just they grasped the nature of reality as being kind, and they were interested in love and serving others, and they opened their heart, they found acceptance, they unblocked all the lower triad and perfected their focus on the lessons of love.
I'm curious to read about that. Do you know of any, how would I, like, keywords that I would look up or something, how to find the other references to them?
Let's see. Let me see if I can just take a moment and see if I can find it.
Thanks.
For what it's worth, I agree with you, Erin, that it was, for lack of a better term, a primitive, primal culture that, before technologies was more honed in on collective and village and tribe and connection and heart-centered, and there's what some might use the term animism, the idea that everything is living and sentient, from the rocks and the trees, and a lot of native indigenous cultures, humankind, as far back as we can go, according to modern studies, has animism, that belief system that all is one and all is sentient and alive. And so to me, that just would have been so much easier to cultivate that. And that makes a lot of sense to me too.
Mm-hmm. I found it. 21, you want me to read it?
Yeah.
2128. Don says, then in the second 25,000 year major cycle, was there any great civilization that developed? And then Ra says, I'm Ra in the sense of greatness of technology. There were no great societies during this cycle. There was some advancement among those of Deneb, who had chosen to incarnate as a body in what you would call China. There were appropriately positive steps in activating the green ray energy complex in many portions of your planetary sphere, including the Americas, the continent, which you call Africa, the island, which you call Australia, and that which you know as India, as well as various scattered peoples. None of these became what you would name great, as the greatness of Lemuria or Atlantis is known to you, due to the formation of strong societal complexes, and in the case of Atlantis, very great technological understandings. However, in the South American area of your planetary sphere, as you know it, there grew to be a great vibratory distortion towards love. These entities were harvestable at the end of the second major cycle without ever having formed strong social or technological complexes.
Thanks.
Yep. And I actually even think I'm recalling that there was another return to this group in another session where I might be making this up, but I think Donna asked about it, and it was like, who are these entities? Or maybe I was just talking to someone else about it. I don't know. But I think that they said like people like some of the saints that we know from the Christian tradition are reincarnated souls from that group.
Mhm.
So, you know, Saint, you know, the one that worked with the animals. I think they mentioned a few saints. Yeah, Francis, Saint Francis.
Right, they did mention Saint
They
Francis.
mentioned a few saints, and those saints are souls reincarnating from that group.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. 1521. BJ, do you feel like reading again?
Sure. 1521. Questioner, well, in yesterday's material you stated we offer the law of one, the solving of paradoxes. You also mentioned earlier that the first paradox, or the first distortion I meant, was the distortion of free will. Could you tell me if there's a sequence? Is there a first, second, third, fourth distortion of the law of one? I am Ra, only up to a very short point. After this point, the manyness of distortions are equal to one another. The first distortion, free will, finds focus. This is the second distortion, known to you as logos, the creative principle, or love. This intelligent energy thus creates a distortion known as light. From these three distortions come many, many hierarchies of distortions, each having its own paradoxes to be synthesized, no one being more important than another. That's the end of a topic. I guess I
Okay,
could
we can
keep
pause
it.
for a second.
Yeah.
Do you all feel clear about that? Those first three distortions?
More and more clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say this too,
Yeah.
which has been niggling at me, and my brain can't stop throwing it back at me to think about it. I forget which session it was. Ross said the distortion known as love, or as you may call it, understanding. So now every time I read the word love, I'm mixing it with the word understanding. And I think that's something that's skipped over a lot, that I don't know how deeply has been discussed, the idea that the distortion known as love is also known as, you could interchange the word with understanding. And I'm like, if you flipped every single thing, every time you use the word light, or I mean, not light, love, to understanding, I feel like that changes big time. It does for me. So
Yeah, totally. I hear you on that. And it's a little, I don't know, from my perspective, I would want to add the caveat that I don't think you can do it in every context where they talk about love, because love is one of these words where, depending on the context, it can mean a really different thing. It's sort of like in Walter Russell, where Walter Russell uses light in contexts that are profoundly different from one another. You know, you can't just use them simultaneously. And so let's zoom in on this for a second. So, okay, the first three distortions. The second distortion, known to you as logos, the creative principle, or love. You know, those are very distinct concepts. Like, those are really interesting. You know, it's interesting that they say, oh, those are interchangeable. But hang on, how can those be the same thing? And I think love in this context is different than like the lessons that we're learning about in third density. I'm sorry, in fourth density. You know, we're moving towards the lessons of love. We're trying to make the choice to open our hearts so that we can, you know, so that we can enter fourth density. Fourth density is all about learning the lessons of love. But I don't think fourth density is all about learning the lessons of the second distortion. Do you know what I mean? I think the context of the word love are different, and metaphysically we're talking about different things there. So that's why it's tricky. So I'm not sure in this context, Nia. I really appreciate what you're saying, in terms of like interchanging love and understanding. And I also find that to be incredibly, like, it's really beautiful. But I think that's like love in the context of like human love, or the love of an entity for another, which is a little bit of a different thing than what we're talking about with the second distortion love, I think. So let's just see, let's discuss this. So how can love, second distortion love, be the same thing as logos or the creative principle. I'm so curious to hear what you all think about that. BJ.
I can say what I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think another way that I think about this is focus, like, because that's one of the things that Ra says, like, free will finds focus. And I think focused, like, free will is the capacity, I think, or this is one of the ways that I think of free will. It's the capacity to seem as though I'm not everything, to seem as though I am a thing, not everything, right? Like, in order to experience a thing, I need to be able to block out everything else and just be this thing. And so the focus, like finding focus, what is it that I'm going to focus that on, is one of the ways that I think of the second distortion. And so I think of it also as, like, what am I interested in? So what is it that I love? You know, like that's an expression of love, is like, I'm interested in, you know, like, for instance, existing as one, like, to use the example from Little Soul in the Sun, existing as one who's learning about forgiveness. And so in order to learn about forgiveness, I need to seem as though I was wronged, you know, so that I can forgive. So I want to focus on that. I love forgiveness so much that I'm going to call in the experience of being wronged, or, you know, some other lessons to experience forgiveness. And I think that creative principle, because that's my lens, that's what I want to see, that creates that experience. And I think, I mean, logos, I think, is the word that I have the least grasp on in those. But, you know, what I do understand about logos is, like, when we refer to the sun, for instance, the sun gets to, like, call the game. And I think, you know, finding focus, or choosing where I'm putting, you know, what limited thing I'm going to be, is a way of calling a game. It's a way of, like, this is what I want to call into being. So those are my thoughts.
Nice. Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, BJ. I appreciate that articulation. What about you, Nia? You got anything to say?
I like what you were calling the creative principle as, like, your focus, your lens. Like, and I know this, what you were saying has, like, an overlap around the inquiring together, but, like, that when you're using the terminology desire and focus and creative principle and lens, it's going all the way back to first distortion, free will. The one infinite creator wanted to experience itself. Boom. There was a thought, and then there was infinity. And now we're all these little nano, for lack of a better term, particles of experience that we get to individualize that lens. We each get to be our incarnated creative principle. And I love the little soul in the sun reference too. That's really stuck with me. I've given that one to adults to just, like, boil down the the conversations with God. I'm like, here, this just read this, and that kind of sums it up. And that was the first thing I remember. I grabbed that before I even knew I was going to have children. I was just like, this book right here. And I remember reading it in the car when I was pregnant, and I had already had it, but I don't even remember why I was in the car with me that day. And I'm like, I'm really sick to my stomach, nauseous from the pregnancy. And I'm like, I'm reading that. And then something hit me in a way that was my personal forgiveness of catalysts, of wrongdoings, of quote unquote evil in the world, and at least the smaller, more manageable catalyst levels anyway. But, like, that made a lot of sense for me. So I see that as well as individuated creative principles in that regard too. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the keys for me of understanding these first three, and especially the second one, in Logos, is Ra's teaching about the fractal nature of the Logos. Like, the first desire, as you just said, Nia, is the creator desires to know itself. And in its infinite unmanifest state, it can't. It's all undivided. There's no vibration. There's no movement. There's no motion. There's no distance. There's no relationship. And so, okay, so that's the first distortion, is like, all right, well, I need to figure out a context within which I can experience myself. And then it's like, all right, well, the infinite possibility of what I could experience, because it's an infinite being with infinite power. The second distortion is choosing from that infinite capacity what, and the creative principle part is like, what will I create? And it starts with galaxies. Well, there's this whole weird thing about, well, there's a primal logos, which just creates the whole universe. Okay, so it starts with a universe, let's just say. And then each galaxy gets to choose a refinement of a universe and be like, all right, well, I want to create life that is, whatever. I honestly don't fathom how diverse galactic life can be, but Ra gives us a hint that it can be quite diverse. But our Milky Way galaxy refined the idea of universe and made a more specific, contained idea of life that can evolve, and created this universe. And then each of the suns within that refine, through this fractal branching, refine. Well, and our sun was like, well, I'm interested in, and then we are now stepping in, and we're sparks of our sun, and we're choosing the even more specific ideas of what we want to experience. And so that fractal nature of the creative process really helps me gain insight into this whole first three distortions. So I think that's worth noting. And then light, the third distortion, this intelligent energy, thus creates a distortion known as light. Light is the substance that the creator, kind of uses to produce the illusion of form and motion and separateness and finiteness and all the characters in the play that's playing out here in this ballroom of thoughts, as Ross calls it, dancing thoughts.
Light is the seeming.
Yeah. Light is the seeming.
Well, if we didn't have light in our third density, modern scientific cultural five senses, let's not even including the sixth sense. So like, let's say we didn't have light and we didn't even need these five senses, and we were in the dark and we were relying on the sixth sense only, we may not even feel or notice the separateness anymore. Like, light on one hand brings light, but the flip side to it is that it creates the illusion of the separateness as well. So it's kind of like, if we didn't have the light that we're so fond of and live from, then we may be in our sixth sense only, and therefore it negates the first free will distortion of duality and experiencing itself.
Yep. Yeah, right. Because the light that we sense with our senses is dual. It's actually the same, and this comes from Walter Russell. It's actually the same thing as the deep dark space, but it's condensed into a form that we can perceive. But we couldn't perceive it if there wasn't dark. I mean, it's part of the dual nature of this, third density space-time. Yeah. Yeah, it's dual. That's right. And then that whole we could get into a whole discussion about the difference between time space and space-time, but we won't, because we have 26 minutes left and I'd like to finish the reading. But yeah,
We don't have enough time and space for it.
I don't have time space for it because we're in space-time. And it's marching along in a linear fashion. Okay. Anything else on the first three distortions? Any other pieces of? Okay. Let's keep going. 1522. Questioner. You also said that you offered the law of one, which is the balancing of love, light, and light, love. Is there any difference between love, light, and light, love? I am Ra. This will be the final question of this time space. There's the same difference between love, light, and light, love, as there is between teach learning and learn teaching. Love, light is the enabler, the power, the energy giver. Light, love is the manifestation which occurs when light has been impressed with love. And then there's some maintenance, contact maintenance stuff. So yeah, the difference between light love and love light. Let's talk about that. That's pretty interesting. Ties right into what we were just talking about. Love light is the enabler, the power, the energy giver. Light love is the manifestation which occurs when light has been impressed with love.
So again, it's like, to me, the way I'm reading this is light love is the seeming. Like whatever it is that is loved, and like if we again go back to like second distortion love, what am I interested in? What is the focus? Then light is like the tool of that love. Light is what supports the seemingness of that interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I read this portion, I really lean into what I've learned from Walter Russell, because Walter Russell just breaks this down so clearly, and the relationship between light, lowercase light, the manifest light, and and God's idea, the creator's interest, the creator's love, like you were saying, BJ, like what, love, the relationship between love and what I want, what I'm interested in. So at the level of, the creator, which all of this is, including our own desires, is, what we love is what precedes light. So love comes first. Love is the invisible force, the invisible portion of God's infinite idea that we're interested, that God is interested in. And then light is the giving that idea a body, giving that idea something to occur or appear in the illusion, in space-time. So the way I read this is that love / light is another way of saying love.
Yeah.
And light love is another way of saying light. But they're paired because there can be no light without love, and there can be no love that doesn't produce light, or something like that. Like they go together. They're bundled. They're two sides of the manifestation process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on LL research page, when I think it goes by, there's topics, and then you can click that, and then there's one on psychic greetings. And it is a continual reference to the sessions that Ra states, your love is your shield. Your love is the buckler, is the shield, and you don't need to worry because there's so much love that's producing so much light that can't be penetrated. And so to me, that's a constant, because it references chinks in the armor of your light shield, whereas when you're doing the shadow work, when you're looking at the things that you may not like, that may cause doubting or depressive thoughts or despair or anything like that, like when you have something you haven't worked through and doing the shadow work yet, that's the chink in the armor that can be taken advantage of. It's like a hole in your light shield.
Yep.
When someone is in a state of utter awareness, utter love, acceptance, that's the whole know yourself, know yourself, accept yourself, be creator. When we continue like constantly going through these processes, through meditation, through the shadow work, through the working through the acceptance level of all these things, that to me feels like it's connecting with the love of the one infinite creator spirit, and we feel ourselves as that love, which Ra says in such simplistic terms, but it's not necessarily, especially in today's modern culture and society, like we're knocked down all the time, we're taught to doubt all the time and question all the time, we're not in a state of acceptance all the time. Having done the work, shining the light on the dark parts of the self, using them, as Quo had said, shining the light on that and utilizing that as fuel for the fire to be a light warrior, that again, it's circling back around to the love that creates the light, which then becomes this like live its own living thing of not its own entity, but it's bringing up that part of you. That light shield comes from awareness and acceptance and knowing yourself as creator, and that, you know, true love in those ways are impenetrable, and that creates this light, and that has so many different functions of understanding and ability and experience.
Yeah, totally. And I think that the thing you said about Ra, you know, it's so simple. They put it in such simplistic terms, and here we are in third density, like working through all the, you know, doesn't seem simple sometimes. It seems incredibly complex. But and that's the distance between third density and sixth density. I mean, it's like that, and it takes billions of years to work out, to become truly in touch with that, the simplicity of the process of like of being in love and just like loving the creator and just radiating in that way. Yeah, there's a great distance evolutionarily between where Ra is at and where Earth is at right now. And that's the difference between how simple the law of one is and how complex it seems in our day-to-day lives right now. I feel that too.
Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah. Nia, you want to read 23?
Let's see. Questioner, is there anything we can do to make the instrument more comfortable? And can we have another session today? I am Ra. This instrument requires a certain amount of manipulation of the physical or body complex due to a stiffness. Other than this, all is well, the energies being balanced. There is a slight distortion in the mental energy of this instrument due to concern for a loved one, as you call it. This is only slightly lowering the vital energies of this instrument. Given a manipulation, this instrument will be well for another working. Questioner, by manipulation, do you mean she should go for a walk, or should we rub her back? I am Ra. We meant the latter. The understanding must be added that this manipulation be done by one in harmony with the entity. Are there any short queries before we leave this instrument? Questioner, is it possible for you to tell us anything about what, since we are wanderers, anything about our previous density, which density we came from? Ra, I scan each and find it acceptable to share this information. The wanderers in this working are of two densities. One, the density of 5, that is, of light. One, the density of love light or unity. To express the identity of which came from which density we observe to be an infringement upon the free will of each. Therefore, we state simply the two densities, both of which are harmoniously oriented towards work together. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. Go forth then, rejoicing in the power and the peace of one infinite creator, Adonai.
Nice. Thank you. Well, I certainly have my theories about who's from which. It seems pretty obvious to me, but I don't know what value there is in that. Except to say it is interesting to notice that one is from fifth, because Ross says, I don't know if y'all remember this or not, but Ross says that wanderers are the majority of wanderers are from sixth density. To wander from fourth and to wander from fifth are a little bit more rare because of the because of the metaphysics of what that means. So yeah, to have a fifth density wanderer, there's not a lot of them, I think. Of course they exist, but my feeling is that it's probably like 80% of wanderers are from sixth density. So from fourth and fifth, it's a little bit more rare. Yeah, Amanda.
I was just wanting some clarification. So was Ra saying that he was talking about like Carla and Jim and Don?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. But only two of them are wanderers?
They're all three wanderers. Two of them are from sixth density and one is from fifth.
Okay.
So they're not all from the same home planet, but they don't say it here, but they've been traveling for a while together as a group.
Mm.
So they've had lifetimes before, they've done work before. There's a lot of harmony that comes into this lifetime and into the LL group because of the history they have together. They've traveled and done work together before.
So I
Which
recall
is
it
why
as
they
two
have that
from,
narrow bandwidth. Sorry, go ahead, babe.
I recall it as two from sixth and one from fifth too, but it doesn't say in this question and answer that two are from sixth. It
Yeah,
just
they must get
they're
into
two
it at
densities.
another
Yeah.
session. I don't remember which one it is.
Okay. You go, Nia.
I was just jamming on the fact that Ra had said the reason why they could use that narrow bandwidth with Carla was because they had all worked together before. They were already a cohesive love, light, love working group. And basically the love between them and their ability to work together because they had already before was part of the main reason why Ra could even come through them and why it hasn't been replicated.
Right. Yeah. Well, and also at another point, Ra says that the three social memory complexes that came and worked with Earth a long time ago, or the group of Ra that worked with the Egyptians, whatever group worked with the South Americans, and then whatever third group they never name, were all, I think they were all sixth density social memory complexes. And they say at one point, now this is in the early 80s, they say at one point that most of the wanderers are from those three groups. So there's a lot of wanderers there from Ra. So I would assume that the two sixth density wanderers of this group are also from Ra. Like Ra sent two souls to Earth to incarnate, and now as Earthlings, they're here available to be channels, to be the instruments and to do this work that they put in place. It's interesting because like they're providing both ends of the work. They're both Ra is both the source and the receiver, I think.
It's sort of like how we talk to our higher selves.
Yeah.
Like that's just me talking to me, but I'm glad that I'm out there so that I can hear myself.
Yeah, right. I know. It's confusing. It's complicated.
Well, I wonder too if that's why, because it always bothered me that Ra was like, well, even if I just reach one of you, that's enough. And I was like, this always just felt like some sort of like karmic debt that Ra felt like they needed to fix. And that's why it was like, even if I just reach one of you, I did what I was supposed to. Because I know a lot of us are over here going, how could that be? How, and then we have the discussion around like if we reach one, then it goes into our social memory complex and Akashic record, and we can individually tap into and receive the wisdom that way. And so it was like, well, that kind of explains that. But it always felt to me like Ra is doing this out of a karmic debt of sorts, like an agreement, and that it was like, okay, I reached my one, I'm good. you know, I did what I was supposed to do. And that never sat right with me. I mean, I kind of get it, but something, and if the three were, or in any of them were, you know, Carla, Dawn, or Jem were of Ra, extending themselves to make that connection between, to establish whatever energetic writing that needed to happen. Um, that makes sense, I suppose.
I totally hear your tension though, because it's like if Ra was to reach one of them and the one that they reach was already from Ra, like what actual net benefit has been? Is that a part of your like question? Is like, yeah, you can see that.
Well, because it was like, you know, Ra was like, well, I don't care if you write a book. I don't care if, you know, we don't care if this reaches other people. And, you know, Dawn and them are like, this needs to reach other people. Like, we have to bring people along with us. This shouldn't be just for the three of us. And so there was always that. And for me, I'm like, so the explanation we came up with is that it was, we could all access it because it was in our Akashic record, so to speak. You know, something I still don't know what feels off. There is a tension there that doesn't quite sit right with me for that.
Yeah, totally. BJ?
Yeah, something that feels true to me about it is I think Ra sees the literalness of our oneness. And so reaching what seems to us to be one is to Ra reaching all, because consciousness has been affected, you know, even if it's like veiled consciousness, it's all you know, it's all consciousness. And I also imagine that they kind of mean, like, if I think of myself, for instance, and they reach me, they don't have a will necessarily that I would then spread it. But, and this is just what my mind makes up about it, I think they would trust that my will would care to spread it or something like that. Like then, like they've done their part, which is, you know, the first ball hitting the marble, and then the next marble is gonna like do whatever it does with it, you know. And even if I didn't, you know, if they were reaching me in particular, even if I didn't spread it in terms of writing a book or go out and teach it, my consciousness, in as much as it's impacted, would reach others, like in a fractal, energetic, you know, crystallized healer kind of way. Like I would be radiating it out in whatever way is right for me to do it. Anyway, that's just some of the things where my mind goes with that.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah. Amanda?
Yeah, just to add on to that is this what I've experienced in working with my own Akashic records is that what's most important is to focus on what we're doing and what our heart is what our heart is called to do, and not do anything because of a hopeful outcome. But it's like the orientation is like on the love of the act itself. And so I wonder if Ra just had this really strong desire to connect and to share this information just because that was the desire. And then whatever happens is like secondary from their perspective. You know, like that whole like just release the outcome and focus on the desire.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I appreciate all those comments.
That really resonates for me. And I got a little download today in meditation about that same thing that was like, each moment is for itself. It exists for itself and exists to make the choice again. So like, for instance, okay, just like sort of a mundane example, like I order a specific drink at a cafe and they give me the wrong drink. I could like reflect back and like, oh, what could I have done differently? Or this should be a different drink, or, like, which is like referring to potential different outcomes. But now here I am with this drink that they gave me, and this is a choice point. This is what matters. Here I am with this drink. Now I get to choose what happens. Like, I can choose to let them know this isn't the drink that I ordered, whatever. Like, each moment exists as its own, like, whole on its own, like, now's the choice point again. And we can refer to, the relevance of, what did I say when I ordered it? What did they do behind the counter? What am I going, like, and that only is important in as much as it impacts and affects my choice in this moment. I don't know if that translated, because it was such a mundane example. But anyway, I just feel like I got a clear download today in meditation that's really related.
Mm-hmm.
I think zoomed out perspective of sixth density may have more to do with it, and I may be overthinking it or over analytical about it from my third density perspective of like you said, some points that Ross awareness of us all being one may have more to do with the phrase, well, if I've reached one, I've done my job, rather than our perspective. Their density is not the density of understanding.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
all
you're
just
totally
trying
onto
to
it,
crunch
Nina.
it and like
That's it. It's like it's like their consciousness and what they see when they look out into their experience is, it is so different than what we see. I that's my sense of it. Of course, I can't know. And the one other thing I want to say about this, is it, for me, it brings up the profound, like, I don't even know how to say it. I almost have a hard time putting it into words, but infinity, like to contemplate infinity, and that the creator's nature is infinite. And the whole purpose of the creator creating the creation is to experience any portion of infinity, any fraction of infinity, gives the creator more experience than it had when it was in its infinite state. And so it's almost like, to take it to its extreme, the creator could create a whole galaxy, and as long as there was one novel experience that it hadn't, one thing that it hadn't known about itself, that it was able to learn through the creation of that galaxy, it's nothing to the creator, because the creator's infinite. Like, it's so different. It's just so different than how I think. I think it's so different than how we think in third density, when Ross says, well, to reach one is enough. It's so different, it's just so different than how we tend to think of it. But it's like, well, to an infinite being, why not? Like, why not? It has infinite time, infinite power, infinite patience to spend. Why isn't it enough just, to like, for Ra to serve the creator in the way that seems true to them? Their essence is to teach the law of one. If they come to Earth and they teach one, they've succeeded. They've given the creator that experience of novelty, and that's enough. Anyway, it's just hard to talk about infinity, but to me, that's what happens. My mind starts like being like, right, the creator's infinite, and Ra is closer to that knowing than we are. So I feel like that's a part of it too.
you did good. That was good expression.
Good. All right. Any final thoughts anyone wants to share? Questions before we close?
I just want to say that I appreciate so much of the conversation over the last couple hours. This has been awesome.
Yeah, totally. Me too. Yeah, I appreciate y'all a lot. Thanks for being here and creating this little container of metaphysical study and evolving together. Yeah, I really appreciate this.
I'm glad you made it, Yuri, even if you weren't able to be vocal. I liked what you did chime in with. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Love
thanks,
y'all.
I think we're going to be covering really similar ideas, but from a contemplative perspective.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I'll be there.
I'm so excited.
Sweet.
Okay. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Mwah.